The Bookshelf with Ryan Tubridy is brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. Eason have a rich heritage of bookselling since 1886, and it's probably where you got your first ever book, or maybe your last one, and indeed, hopefully, your next one after you listen to this episode of our podcast. And stay listening for our Ryan Recommends slot, my weekly recommendation, where I'll discuss a book I've read recently that I think you'll really enjoy too. As ever, all the books we discuss on this episode of our podcast are available now in your local Eason store, or order online from easons.com before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch with free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Eason, be inspired. Welcome to The Bookshelf with me, Ryan Tubridy, and we are very, very happy to have the wonderful Dawn O'Porter as our guest today. She's a best-selling author, presenter and fashionista, as you will see shortly if you're watching on YouTube. Dawn is, of course, known for her very, very witty novels like The Cows and So Lucky, while she's captivated audiences with her storytelling. Today, we're going to uncover, hopefully, a different side of her as she shares her favourite childhood book, of course, the book that made her cry, and the book that changed her life. These, among many other questions and talking points. Dawn, welcome. Lovely to see you.
Thank you for having me.
You had a very interesting life as a child, and that's why I'm really interested to find out what it was like at home for you in terms of books and your relationship to reading. Can you give us a sense of, I'd like to go back to kind of 5-6 years old when you're sentient and you have memories of meaning.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a Leave It to the Beaver family home as most people might have, or a lot of people might have had. Can you give us a sense of what it was like then?
Well, you're right. It wasn't normal. When I was 6, my mother died. And so I lived with my grandparents at that time, with her, my mother. And then after she died, I carried on living with my grandparents for a few years. And then when I was 10, I moved in with my aunt and uncle. So I was kind of all over the place. And in terms of, it was a very distracting life. I don't think I had the normal focus that a normal child would have when it comes to things like books and things. But I remember so clearly stories being so important and such an escape. And it's one of my few memories that I've actually got of my mum is reading her Jack of the Beanstalk. And it's this really sweet little moment where we're sitting out on a sun lounger outside. And obviously, there's no sun loungers inside. That would be weird. I was just reading her Jack and the Beanstalk.
You were reading her?
I would have been 6, just about to turn 7. It would have been really near the end, and I had no idea. And I know that because I look back and she was crying while I was reading her this story. And you think, oh God, that was such a powerful moment for her. She knew what was coming and I didn't. And she was crying and I was reading her this story and just feeling like I was trying to make her happy reading the story. And it was a lovely thing between us. And wow, I've actually not thought about that in a really long time. That just came to me when you asked me that question. And I mean, I guess it's a testament to the power and the release of stories and what they can do.
What a visceral story, because your innocence, at such a profound moment with your mum she knew that this beautiful thing, this story time, this beautiful child, she knew she was saying goodbye. I find that really,
it's mad, isn't it?
Really very terribly moving, but really upsetting in some ways. And how were you very innocent? I mean, had you any idea what was happening? Or
I didn't have any idea. I didn't know she was dying.
You weren't told she was sick?
No, I wasn't. And because I got brought up on Guernsey, she would go to the mainland for her treatment. So even that was very kind of separate. I didn't see that happening. I thought she was just going away. She used to send like postcards back with a castle on the front saying, wish you were here and miss you girls and that kind of thing. So I just thought she was like staying at this lovely big castle, but actually she was in Southampton having chemotherapy. So we were very kind of shielded from all of that stuff.
Let's talk about her for a moment, because she has a name. What was her mum's name?
Carol Ricks.
Carol. And obviously a very emotionally attuned person, that she would be listening to your story and realizing the enormity of such a simple yet profound moment in life. You can't have a huge amount of memories of her because you were so young, but do you have a peppering of them?
I do, and it's mostly sensory. I remember that memory very clearly. I remember it's her red nails and the smell of Chanel No. 5 that I really remember the most. If someone walks, my mother-in-law wears Chanel No. 5, and sometimes I get a whiff of it and I'm like, oh. And a while ago, I bought myself a bottle and I was like, it's time for me to, and I just couldn't. And someone, you know, when you're walking through an airport and someone will spray you with a perfume. And I remember this woman once, it was very surreal because it is, they don't actually spray you with perfumes normally. But this woman sprayed me with Chanel No. 5 before I got on a long haul flight.
Yes.
And it was such a bizarre, like almost being attacked thing to do. And then I just like, this smell was with me for the whole flight. And it was such a like, it was just such a physical slap in the face. It was just a really bizarre experience. And I just sat on the whole flight thinking about her, which it was a long time ago. I don't have days where I think about her all the time, but I remember that really clearly about, 15, 20 years ago.
You say slap in the face. Was it a slap in the face or did it feel more like a hug?
Well, no, because I wasn't expecting it. I couldn't escape it. And it was lovely and it's fine but it was just like, wow, this smell is very powerful. It's, that really took me back there to being with her.
If it's not too intrusive a question, Brian Cox, the actor, was sitting where you are now not too long ago, and he spoke about the fact that when he was a boy and he wasn't allowed to attend his father's funeral because he was too young, he was considered too young, he ended up watching television at home, which he thought might have been a pivotal point as to why he ended up doing what he did. Did you attend your mum's funeral?
No, I didn't. And it's a strange thing because I still am on the fence whether that was the right decision or not.
Are you?
Yeah. It's weird not to be part of the closure that everybody gets at a funeral in a way. But also I was so young and we were at the kind of wake afterwards, which was very weird. I don't know.
Even to this day, you don't know whether it was the right or wrong decision.
I don't know, because I imagined the funeral and it would have been horrible. It would have been so sad and it would have been, everyone's looking at you and you're a child and it would have just been a really, really sad hour that I didn't have to go through. And then some ways that's kind of nice, but in another way, you feel like you should have been there. But yeah, it's a very strange thing. I'm not angry about not going to it, but because I really don't know. I don't know. I've been in that, I've been to the place where she got buried many times at other funerals since. So I can imagine the room and what it was like. I think some days I'm glad I wasn't there and some days I wish I was.
Isn't it funny? It depends on the day or a mood.
Yeah.
Are you the sort of person who thinks that she's watching you or with you or talking to you or? I'm
not.
Yeah.
I'm not a religious person at all.
Yeah.
And I'm very comfortable with the fact that when someone's gone, they've gone.
Okay.
However, I definitely have gone through different stages of my life where I've nominated an inanimate object and decided that it's her. And when we lived in LA, there was a palm tree that I used to look at out of the bathroom window. And I just one day decided that was her and just started talking to it.
Did you address her?
Well, what was really strange about this, it didn't mean to be a therapy session about grief in my life, but it's relevant to the book that I'm promoting at the moment because it's kind of about that. But my friend died in 2020 and I hadn't spoken to the palm tree in a really long time. And I was in the bathroom a few months after my friend died and I thought, and I just looked up and I went, the palm tree. And there was another palm tree. Another palm tree.
Now, I can't decide whether I'm talking to somebody who's being comedic about this or somebody being spiritual about this.
Suddenly there was another palm tree and I was like, where did you come from? So then I chatted to both of them.
You're Three's Company then, or Tree's Company. Okay, let's not do that. Do you talk about your dad at all, or? I
do. I love my dad. My dad's a big burly Scotsman. He lives on the edge of Loch Lomond. He's wonderful.
And good relationship all around there, so that's good. Okay, but you didn't live with your dad then?
No, I've never lived with my dad. So my mum and dad got divorced when I was just before I turned 1. Yeah. Up in Scotland, and she moved down to Guernsey with me and my sister to be with the rest of her family.
Okay, now we're into the grandparents, auntie and uncle, and let's talk about books. I would have thought, given the way you've described your life at that point, that books were either going to be verboten because you didn't too much going on, or the most beautiful welcome portal to another world. So where are you with that? Or?
Somewhere in the middle.
Is that right?
So when I was very young, the Roald Dahls and Jack and the Beanstalk and those stories were very easy ways to escape. And then I lost reading for a really long time. I can't remember. I remember finding being given text at school really hard. I found reading really hard. I didn't have any focus. I found it, I just didn't have any focus. I didn't enjoy it. I was far too busy thinking about other things. And then a certain book came into my life, which I think you're going to ask me about. We're going to get
there. What, just before we go there, and thank you. But what other things were you thinking of? Was it just life, or was it specifically, were you distracted by a particular thing or things?
I think I was, when you lose a parent, you crave something that you're never going to find. And I wanted to be liked by everybody. I was kind of obsessed with my social life, boys, being naughty, being fun, having fun, being adventurous, just anything that would distract me from what was going on in my head, but all good, I was all good fun. I just wanted to be out. I lived on a tiny island. I just want to be cycling my bike 100 miles an hour around my island, being naughty, meeting up with my friends and having a great time.
Okay, and you say distracting from the things that were going on in your head?
Yeah.
Which were?
Just, I missed my mum, and I was living with my aunt and uncle, which was great in many ways and very hard in other ways. Their kids had already left. They thought they were about to get their life back, and then they got 2 bereaved girls after raising 2 boys. It was hard.
Yeah.
It was there were really tough times for all of us. I look back, I used to be so angry with them. I was like, and I look back and I'm like, you did what for us? Yeah. Wow, you're absolute legends as a mother now.
Yeah.
And so, but it was difficult sometimes. So sometimes, and no one was massively talking about my mum. So it was this sort of elephant in the room. So the best thing to do is just crack on like it didn't happen. And the only way that I could do that was to just distract myself with friends and, having a good time.
And then one day, a book came along. And this brings us to our first book, Donna Porter, which is the book from your childhood. So tell us a little bit about what you've gone for and why. And also when you first came across the book, if you can recall.
So that's what's interesting, because I went to an all-girls school in Guernsey called the Ladies' College, which was quite stiff. And I remember the texts I just thought was so boring that we were given. And then one day, around the age of 15, we were given Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, which wasn't the kind of text that we'd been given before. It was challenging and interesting, about a complicated character. And I was like, this one sounds quite interesting. I think I'm actually going to read this book rather than pretend I've read this book. And I read it, and I was just so... I was just so taken by it. There is a line, I think it's on the first page, maybe it's the second page, where it says, "There's never been a time that I didn't know I was special." And it's not saying special as in brilliant. It's just saying different, broken, searching for something, not thinking normally. And for me, I was like immediately connected to this character. I'm special. I'm broken. I'm damaged. I think when you lose a parent when you're a kid, you feel damaged. I think shame and grief live really closely to each other and can sometimes kind of, appear as the same thing, present as the same thing with the same kind of emotions. And you would often feel like, you go into my friends' houses and they'd be like a normal family, and you'd feel like the kind of, slightly filthy one coming round who's like, doesn't have a mum and dad doesn't live there, and everyone else is so normal and perfect. And so you just feel a bit damaged. And this book just, here we are. This is like a girl character who feels different. So I'm in page 1, page 2, I'm into this book. And then it turns into a book about a really complicated relationship with a mother.
Yeah.
A relationship that I didn't have. Unlike all of my friends who could just rely on their mothers for everything, I didn't have that. And I was like, again, there's other people who can't rely on their mother. I just grabbed onto it for that reason. Also, it was the first book that I'd ever read with any sort of gay storyline, which I just thought was fascinating
Yes.
and loved. And immediately, Guernsey's a very sheltered place, especially back then. You know, it was not racially diverse, it was not sexually diverse. And I just loved reading about something that I didn't know about. And I just think it's the most extraordinary book. It remains my favorite book of all time. It's so kind of, have you read it?
No, I haven't. I'm intrigued as you're talking about it because it sounds like the kind of book that get banned in America now.
Sort of.
You know, I
And
hate to say it, but it's because it's so progressive. I'm so impressed by that, and that the fact it covers the amount of storylines it's covering.
Yeah. So the mum in it is a very, very, very religious, very domineering mother who has this kind of wayward, gay, rebellious daughter who wants to be independent of her mother. And it's just it's a really heart-wrenching read in many ways, but you're rooting for her to get away from her mother. Well,
Yes.
I was.
Yes.
I was like, I hope you get away from this woman. And you know, later discover that it's kind of very loosely based on Jeanette Winston's real life, and she wrote an autobiography many years later, which is so similar to the plot of the book.
Yeah. You were tick, tick, tick.
Yeah, and I, you know, and that's why when I wrote Paper Aeroplanes, which is my version of that, that's the book that is, you know, my history. And when I read, I think the autobiography, is it called Why Be Something When You Can Be Why Be Normal When You, I can't remember what it's called. I'm sorry, Jeanette Winston, I love you so much. It's completely gone out of my head, but it's also a brilliant book.
Yes.
And I just think Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit is extraordinary. It was also the book that made me want to be a writer. It just had this kind of guttural reaction in me.
It sounds like it became a manual of some sort, or at least an emotional guide.
An emotional guide, and also creatively an inspiration about how to your characters. And I remember thinking this back then, way before I was ever brave enough to say the words I'd like to write fiction, but I loved writing fiction from a really early age. But that your characters don't have to be relatable and likable to everybody. They just have to be really believable,
authentic,
yeah. And that was my first real example of a character like that, and that really took you on a journey, and where you were rooting for them.
And did that kind of reignite a love of reading again, or books again? Did you find yourself bookworming after that?
It definitely got me better at it. I would say not for long. I went back to being. I really, really, really got into reading in my 20s.
Okay.
Yeah, it was late, and I just didn't have time for it.
Yeah.
I was just too busy having a great time.
That's okay. I'm looking at you with envy. You know, I had too much time to read.
I was so jealous of the kids that read.
Were you?
So jealous.
Imagine we were all jealous of each other.
I know. I was so jealous of it, and I feel like now I'm making up for it. I'm an obsessive reader now. I read walking down the street and bump into people. Like I don't watch TV anymore. I am an obsessive reader, and I feel like I'm making up for lost time. But back then, it just wasn't my priority. And then I would occasionally read a book and go, "Oh, reading's really great," and then get back to just wanting to kiss lots of boys.
Yeah, which you did by your own admission, and had fun getting there. But that's what you're meant to be doing. And then let's head towards your 20s then, and that sense of maturation and the boring bit about becoming an adult, which is such a bad deal for everyone.
Yeah.
But you did. Was that an obvious process, or did it happen quite quickly where you went, now I want to be a bit more together and maybe whittle down on the crazy?
Well, yes. And also then I became just so career driven. So when you're raised in a place like Guernsey, you need to get off it. You need to get off this island to get into the rest of the world, to go and do what you've always wanted to do. So by the time I went to drama school when I was 19, and then I went back to Guernsey for a summer. But by the time I was 22 and I was leaving Guernsey for the last time and moving to London, I was like a wound up tight ball of ambition. Just get me to London so I can explode. Yeah. I was just so ready. And I hit the ground running. I can't remember exactly where my first job in TV came from. I think it had probably come off the back of a work experience placement that I'd done in TV. But I went and I got a job as a runner, and I worked up through the ranks, and I had blinkers on. I was absolutely determined to be a success. I wanted to be on TV, hosting, presenting. I'd kind of set aside the writing dream at this point. I always wrote articles and I always did journalism, but I really was dead set on being a TV presenter.
Where did that come from? Because I didn't hear that in your chat earlier on about your mum or your dad, or indeed your aunt and uncle, not to mention your grandparents. So that kind of driven passion, need, that hunger.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Well, I think I was always that kid, but I think after my mum died and it became sad, I turned to being the Joker.
Yeah.
I became the person that would walk into any room and mask my trauma with a load of jokes. And I became a real performer. And I found the love of the theatre in Guernsey, joined the local theatre group, and never really got any great parts because I don't think I was that good at it. I never really got cast in the school plays, but I wanted it more than anything. I wanted to be on stage. I wanted affirmation. I wanted love. I wanted to be liked. Back then it was all about wanting to be known, to be as famous as possible.
To what end?
Well, I didn't know at the time. I just wanted to be really, really well known. I wanted my own chat show. I wanted my own radio show.
Yeah.
I wanted to be, I wanted to host the Big Breakfast and all of those things that were around at the time. I wanted to do that. I looked at that job and I thought, that's where happiness lies. That is the thing that I want to do more than anything else.
I can see why. That was a very buzzy time.
It was so exciting.
And, now that the version of that now for younger listeners or viewers is probably to be on a reality TV show. But at that time, there was some just great TFI Friday. Don't forget your toothbrush. All the great shows that were just, there was something happening around then.
They were so great. And this is, now it's really, you can do this on your own TikTok channel.
Well,
and you can have a massive audience and you can be as entertaining as you want. Back then there was no internet, so there's no YouTube. There was none of that. TV was so significant. It was so huge. If you got on a TV show, you were a household name. It was massive.
Yeah.
It doesn't really carry that same weight anymore, but it really was big. And I remember when I was just working as a runner in a TV production company, I had this unbelievable feeling of, wow, you got from Guernsey to here. It's happening. You're in.
You knew.
Yeah. I was like, you're going to get there because you're already here. And that felt like a huge achievement in itself.
That's great confidence, because some people would have got there and said, I'm here. I hope I stay here. I may fall off. You were saying, this is it. I'm through the door. I just need, that door was ajar. I scrimped in through it and I'm here. So that's a lovely self-confidence to have. Was it cockiness or confidence?
I think it was confidence.
Great. A much better option.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who knew me at the time might say it was cockiness, but as with my perspective at 45, I can look back on myself and say I wasn't cocky and I didn't take things for granted and I didn't ever presume. I just, if there's a difference between presume, I just knew I was going to get there. I knew what I wanted to do, and I was like, there's nowhere else I'm going. It's there. That's it. And I just felt really confident that I could do it. And to be honest with you, I never got the job doing the thing that I set out to do. I never have hosted a TV show like that. Whenever I've presented anything and been given a script, I'm useless at it. That actually ended up not being what I did. I kind of fell into documentary making where I got to be entirely myself, investigate things, be fearless on TV, which I kind of was off TV as well. And I ended up in a much better place suited to me. I wasn't the person who was going to present the Big Breakfast or anything like that. I didn't have that skill, but I managed to find this kind of niche thing that I ended up doing.
You ended up being a storyteller.
Yeah, I ended up being a storyteller.
Storyteller, and that's what you weren't like most people who do a job like this. And I can't act, but I love doing what I do. Equally, you weren't cut out to be as you say, the Big Breakfast presenter for whatever reason. But you could tell a mean story. The camera liked you. You were great on TV or whatever it was, because you clearly had that in you. And also because of your life experience, clearly you must have also had natural empathy when you were telling stories about, difficult stories or in some difficult documentaries. You knew because you'd been down certain roads. Yeah,
I do think that the more you've experienced in your life, the better journalist you are, especially when you're meeting all sorts of different kinds of people.
Yeah. And the damage, sorry to cut across, the damage becomes an asset.
Yeah.
Because you see sadness in people, you see hardship in people in a way that had you not been walking on those coals, you wouldn't feel it.
Damage is a very bonding thing when you allow it to open you up.
If you do.
And I call upon I call upon the sad times in my life every day in my job now. Like,
what does that mean? You call
in
upon
writing
them?
fiction, you know, when I'm writing characters, especially in these books, the Renault and Flo books, I felt their feelings, and I feel if there was, you know, you research to put things together. My life has been a lot of research that I've just kind of been given, and I call upon it all the time.
Let's get to your second book.
Yes.
We're going to go to the book that made you cry. And I always preface this for a lot of people, because for whatever reason, books don't make a lot of people cry. No, it seems to be people often say it's a news report, watching, you know, 6 o'clock news or whatever you're watching on TikTok or a movie, you know, it could be a rom-com on a Sunday when you're at a low ebb or what have you. But books-wise, where are we going for this bit?
Open Water.
Oh, okay.
I only read it like about 8 months ago. It's quite a short book.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Can I hold it while I talk about
Please.
it? How do I describe it? I mean, on the cover it says beautiful and powerful, and those are two really great words for this book.
Who's the author?
It's Caleb Azuma Nelson,
Okay.
and apparently, I mean, he's very young by the sounds of things, and this was his debut novel. It's just the most extraordinary love story. But it turns into something. It's this kind of very passionate love story. And then it just turns into this very insightful, very deep, very emotional kind of look inside at a young black man's life, his experience, the racism that he experiences, his position in the world, how he positions himself. But it's really it feels really familiar in a way, even though it's, you know, I'm a white woman and I'm reading about two black characters having a very black experience in this book. But it was an honor to read this.
So did you identify? Is that what you're saying?
I didn't identify it, but I just mean familiar in that it's just kind of
the love story,
youthful and love and passion, and but it really shows you how like societal trauma can affect someone individually and the way that they have relationships with other people, and how hard it can be to let yourself go when you feel you know, so affected by what's going on around you and the way that people treat you. And I love reading black stories and like stories about what black people have been through, and I think it's so important that we all do, because every time you do, you realize that this character has dealt with things that I've never had to think about in my life and never had to consider. Or I talk about my trauma of my mother dying. He's talking about trauma of the way that a society treats him, which is like, if I was going to compare traumas, I would say this, you know, I had the opportunity to rebuild my life and deal with things inside myself. And, you know, but when you've got this external, when society has an idea of who you are and you can't escape it, the way that makes you feel, it's just very, very beautifully written. And I just loved it. And the question was, what was the last book that made you cry? And it just made me cry. It just made me cry because you root for them so much. And you want them to get together. And he's got to let go of something really heavy to be able to do that. And you just want him to be able to do that so much. But, you know, love stories will make me cry. Out of all of the genres,
it's always the love story.
It's always the love stories.
Is it unrequited love stories, or is it just love stories, broadly speaking? I mean, it's hardly a happy ending is going to make you cry.
No, I know, but I just, you know, I like a happy love story will make me cry. Like I love love. Like I love it when two people find each other.
Yes,
and it's always, and there's so many different ways that authors write that. And I just thought this was a beautiful way to get, you know, to do a love story. There's another book as well called You Make a Fool of Death with Your Beauty.
Right.
Which I also really enjoyed. And
Great title.
Yes. And that is a story about a character who is kind of in this, her boyfriend has died, and she almost gets together with a friend of hers. And he takes her to her dad's house, and she ends up falling in love with the dad. And it is so passionate and so hot.
Curveball.
And it's just such an extraordinary love story. And I cried the whole way through that as well, because I just want people to be together and find love with each other. And it's just lovely when they do. And it's so nice when you read about it and, you know, when a story just tugs at your heartstrings.
And how did you meet your husband?
Wow. I met my husband. He introduced himself to me on Facebook just before my 30th birthday.
Just hi.
I was living out in LA and he moved out there. And a mutual friend had said, "Oh, Dawn Porter's in LA. You should meet up with her." And so he asked me to go bowling on Facebook, and I said no. And then he asked me again, and it was my 30th birthday, and so I said, "I can't go bowling, but come to my party tonight." And that was that.
Okay, a couple of questions. I won't dwell on it, but one, why did you say no?
I was seeing someone else.
Great answer.
Yeah.
Second question: at the party, you were 30, turning 30. Yeah. So you were probably distracted with all your friends and having the crack and everything was going great. And in walks your putative boyfriend or whatever.
Actually, what happened is everyone had left and I was dancing with my dad. Everyone had left. I'm dancing with my dad in a black leather dress, me. And
thanks for the clarity.
And Chris walks in with his friend Ben and he went, "Hello." And I went, "Oh my God, who are you?" And he's like, "Chris." I was like, "Great." So we danced and then he left. And I was like, I think I'm going to marry that guy.
No, that was one of those.
Yeah, one of those.
I'm Chris from Facebook. Yeah.
I know.
God, that could have been like a weird thing.
I know, but he was great. I always describe it as this wingspan just came towards me. You know, Chris, he's huge. So when he puts his arms out, it just goes on and on and on. He just came at me with these arms and just like scooped me up, threw me around, danced with me. And then left. But the only problem is my friend who had lent me her Pilates studio to have the party in, she also said, "I think I'm going to marry that guy."
About Chris?
Yeah, because he danced there as well. So there was a little moment when I was like, "Erica, it's my birthday and he's mine."
And he's my birthday present,
so
not yours.
She had to step aside.
That is a great. That's a good yarn. Now you're sure you haven't just told me the plot of a book you're thinking of writing?
It'd be good, wouldn't it?
It would really, and even the detail, that LA detail of the Pilates studio that your friend rented you.
I know. Well, because I was really broke. I was really, really broke, and I didn't know many people. And so my friend who ran a Pilates studio said, "If we move all the machines to the side, you could have your party here." And so that's what we did. And another friend rented me a dance floor as my present. So we had this black and white Czech dance floor. And another friend said, my two Scottish friends will come and play the bagpipes for you. So we had this really random party.
It sounds really good.
I know, it was the night I met my husband.
Do you think people will be surprised to hear that you were broke? Do you think that people are surprised that you had to have a party like that, given that you were you would have been very well known, and there'd be a perception that you would have been the successful and probably very wealthy. People think that everyone on TV is a millionaire.
Everyone thinks everyone's really wealthy, and it's not very often not the case. No, I was out there because I'd been filming a series, and then the series didn't get recommissioned, and so then 10 months later at this point, which is when the party was, and I was broke and hadn't worked for ages. And I think people would be surprised to hear that, but I always say, please understand that being any kind of artist, whether you're on TV or not, it's an undulating career. And sometimes you're doing well, and sometimes you are on your knees and broke, and your cards are getting denied, and you have to go and get another job to get paid. And it happens at any level of success. You can, if a job comes to an end, you will have a dip in finances, and sometimes that goes on long enough for it to be really scary. And other times you manage to get something just in time. But this was a time in my life when I was absolutely broke, absolutely broke. And I was living in a country where I couldn't work because I didn't have a visa. Well, I had a visa, but I couldn't work for just anybody. And the people that I had the visa with didn't have any work for me. So I was really looking at what I was going to do, and I was going to have to come home. And that's when I met Chris. And so I stayed there for a bit longer. Well, I stayed there for 16 years. Just
a little bit longer. Yeah. You're a mum now, of course, with two children. They're great names. Are we allowed to ask you about that?
Yeah, Art and Valentine.
Yeah, I love that. Why Valentine?
I just love the name. Yeah. And because Chris is such a big guy. So it was pretty sure that the kids are going to be big guys.
Big Roscommon boys.
I just love the idea of a big gentle bear called Valentine. And he is.
I love that. Yeah. And Art is Arthur, or?
No, Art's just Art.
Oh gosh, you gave me that look there.
No, just Art. A lot of people couldn't cope with that for a while. He definitely got called Arthur a lot. And some, when people, mention him in an article or something, they call him Arthur. But no, it's just Art. And when I was pregnant with him in New York, I met this amazing cartoonist called Art Spiegelman, who was just such, he's just such a legend. And I'd already kind of pitched the name Art to Chris. And so when we met Art Spiegelman, we were like, that's it. Doesn't get cooler than that.
Given the way our conversation began, with that beautiful image of Jack and the Beanstalk and your mum and you, I'd love to know what it was like to become a mum for you that first time.
It was great. And I get asked a lot, did it bring up a lot of stuff for you? And it really didn't. I really wanted to be a mum. My sister was a couple of years ahead of me and had 2 boys. Spent loads of time with them. Chris is, strong Irish stock, like amazing dad. It was just a really great experience.
Yeah. You kind of seem to have alluded to the fact that when you were younger that you might have been interested in writing, but that the TV thing, you just wanted to be, as you say, well known or loved or liked or whatever. So what age were you when writing became realistic as a proposition for making a living, given that you've just described that you were pretty much out of pocket and going, where to from here? I mean, there'll be a lot of people listening going, yeah, we've been that soldier face down on the canvas going, what do you do? I
know. I always wrote journalism throughout my 20s, so it was always kind of ticking along, which was great. And after a couple of years of being on my knees in that way, I'd been writing for Stylist magazine. I was their weekly columnist. And they actually, back in the day when you actually got paid quite well to be a columnist, and that was great. And then I lost that. And when I lost that, it all went really wrong because that was my only income. And I had about a year of earning nothing. And I said to Chris, we've got to go back to the UK because I've got to try and piece this back together. I've got to try and claw my career back in some kind of way. It's never going to happen here. So we came home for a bit and got married, and that was that period of time. And during that time, I just got this call from an editor who said, I loved your column in Stylist magazine. I think you write really great books for young adults. Have you ever considered writing fiction? And I went, that's like, I think about writing fiction every day, but I thought I was going to be an old lady, in the shed in the garden that maybe one day might have the guts to write fiction. Mm-hmm. And she said, well, I really think you'd be great at it, and I'd like to offer you a 2-book deal.
Wow. And
she offered me a 2-book deal, and it completely changed my life. And that's when I gave up all hope and dreams and any desire to be on television again, committed myself fully to writing, became columnist for Glamour magazine, started pitching more articles, started to see, right, if you keep writing, you will never be face down, wondering whether you can feed yourself or your cat again, because I'm so in control of my career now rather than just being able to be sacked or just not recommissioned or whatever. So I just suddenly got this work ethic for writing around age 31, 32 when that happened, and I just haven't stopped writing since.
This is a good point to bring up your third book, which is the book that changed your life. I think it's appropriate we talk about that now then.
Yeah.
So what book have you gone for?
So it would be Paper Aeroplanes.
Yeah.
And it was my first fiction, and that came off the back of that call. And as we discussed at the beginning, I had a traumatic childhood, but I kind of coasted through and I battled through life, and I never really accessed what happened to me. I never got any therapy. I never had any help. And Paper Aeroplanes is where I got it all out.
Wow.
So the story is about 2 girls called Renee and Flo. And Renee is very loosely based on me. And she lost her mum. She lived with her grandparents. She ends up living with an auntie. It's not me, and there's many, many differences, but it's undeniably similar. And so many of the things that I went through, I got to write in a fictional version, which was the most therapeutic, cathartic, helpful thing I could imagine doing, and would recommend anyone going through anything trauma to, if you can be bothered, because I know it takes a lot of effort to write down and fictionalize what you went through. Take it and write the conversations you wish you'd had, write the things you wish people had said to you, invent the friend you wish you'd had. Just like, it's cleansing, and that's what Paper Aeroplanes was. It was just this cleansing experience where I got so much of myself down on paper. And I was a very different person after that. I had confidence before, but then I feel like I'd been floating and then my feet just went into my shoes.
Nice
that's how Paper Aeroplanes made me feel. And then I wrote the second book, Goose, which is kind of the same girls a few years later. And then I've just written Honeybee, which is the same girls a few years later. And I am now so separate from Renee. She's her own thing, but in Paper Aeroplanes,
So you needed each other in the
love
first
her.
book, obviously, and you love her. But then you were able to watch her grow, and almost like a child, and let her forge her own existence.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that? But born from the same roots.
Yes, totally. And so at the end of Honeybee, which I won't give away, but Renee takes a different route to what I did in my life. And I'm now, when I write the next book, I think I'm going to do the sliding doors of what my life could have been if I'd have made that decision. And it's really fascinating to do that with yourself. And she, like I said, she is her own person and she's not me, but I play with myself in her. I imagine what it would have been like in all these different ways. Not everyone is able to write fiction. I'm very, very, very lucky to be able to do it and to now be at a point where I'm getting paid for it. It's a really, truly a remarkable thing that I'm grateful for all the time. But I do believe that if you feel you have a book in you that is based on something you've experienced and you want to get it down on paper, that your life will change, whether it's published or not. If you get it down on paper, it is such a brilliant exercise to do.
It's cathartic, obviously. Yeah. Before we go, Dawn, let me ask you a little bit about the name of the autobiography you haven't written yet. And I feel that you have kind of written your autobiography in a manner of speaking, but obviously the one that you haven't written until now, because it can always change as to how you decide the book title, and it could be different next week for all I know. But have you given this any thought? Or
Bum Wipes Saved My Life.
That's the best one we've had.
Thank you.
That's the best one we've had.
After that period of unemployment, I got a job where I became the face of moist toilet tissue. And I was so poor, and the fiction deal changed my life in many ways, but so did bum wipes.
Tell me about the bum wipes, Dawn. It's a question I wasn't expecting to ask today.
So I was approached by a company who made moist toilet tissue.
In the UK?
In the UK. And they said, we love your documentary style. Would you consider a similar style documentary for our adverts to get moist toilet tissue to the masses? They paid me an extraordinary amount of money.
Yes.
To do this job. Money I had never been paid in my life for much less work than I'd ever done in my life. But the reason they had to pay me that much is because no one else really wanted to do it properly. And it is slightly embarrassing when you become the face of moist toilet tissue. So I was on the TV and I would do my style documentaries, kind of go around going, hey, how do you wipe your bum? You should use moist toilet tissue. And that happened. And it's at the time, it was so embarrassing. And then the American company attached to the British company then said, well, we want you to come and do the same thing in America. And they were going to pay me $1 million.
You're joking.
To go and do this. Bear in mind, this is like my husband's just become a global superstar with Bridesmaids, and I've been broke, and I want to bring something to the table. I want to get paid. So I'm being offered all this money to go and be the face of moist toilet tissue in America. And I got the deal so far down the line, and just the last hurdle, I was like, I just can't.
You backed out.
I just can't do it. I can't.
But you'd already done it.
I know, but do you know what I thought in America? Because I just imagine like Chris one day being nominated for an award and us being at some big fancy thing, and then I'm standing there and people being, is that the?
It's the bum wipe lady.
Bum wipe woman.
What's wrong?
And so I didn't. I pulled out, and it was the right thing to do. The fiction deal was happening, and I thought, in time it will pay off to not do that. And so I didn't. But if I was to ever write an autobiography, as we've discussed, I've got loads of sad stuff to talk about, and my life is far from sad. It's actually hilarious and absolutely brilliant. And so I would want to pick a title of something that was funny, and expressed the idea that there was struggle, but also made people laugh. And I think Bum Wipes Saved My Life.
That's great. What do you call it? Moist tissue? Is that
moist toilet tissue. They were called washlets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love because you go between moist toilet tissue, is quite demure, and bum wipes, which is just...
I just call them bum wipes. But Janet Street Porter called me a traitor to feminism in the Daily Mail for like saying that women needed this extra product. Wow. I was like, I'm just broke. I'm just broke. That's it. Why else do you think someone would take this job? Like when you see someone in the public eye doing a job like that, before you say sell out, loser, just think, maybe they were just broke and that was the only job on the table. And so you find yourself doing funny things.
What a beautiful way to end that comment. I really enjoyed that. That is definitely one of the greats in terms of the books, the name of the book that you haven't written yet. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. What a pleasure to talk to you.
You too, as always.
And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Donna Porter. So here's this week's Ryan Recommends, brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. And of course, there's massive interest in the ancient world of ancient Greece and ancient Rome at the moment. Bookshelves are chock-a-block with them. So one guy who's been doing it for a long time anyway is Stephen Fry, who you'll know as an actor and as a great writer. So he's decided to go with Odyssey, it's called. The Odyssey is his take on it. And it tells the tale of Odysseus. And Odysseus has fought in the Trojan War. He's wrecked. He wants to go home. Should take him a few weeks, maybe a few months. It takes 10 years. Why? Well, that's why it's called the Odyssey, because he has this extraordinary journey in which he has to encounter giants and shipwrecks and battles. It's a 10-year journey home. It's an epic story, and it's in great hands with Stephen Fry. So that's the next recommendation. It might take you a week, might take you a month, might take you 10 years if you're a slow reader. It doesn't matter. It's an epic. So enjoy it. This book and all of the books we discuss on this episode of our podcast are available now in your local Eason store, or order them online from easons.com before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch with free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Eason, be inspired.